Thank you very much, Chairman, for inviting me to present the industry perspective and really building on what was just said, that the requirements in order to approve a medicine have significantly changed in the last years. Obviously, it has implications for the pharmaceutical industry, and it's critical that the pharmaceutical industry, the academy, and the regulators have a dialogue to really understand how we can overcome the new challenges. So this is my disclosure. So first, I am a full-time employee of Pfizer, but my talk will not be about Pfizer, but the pharmaceutical industry's role in the research and development of medicines. Third disclaimer is that my role is within medical affairs, so some of you may not know what that means. The reason why I say this is that I'm not directly and personally accountable for anything that is related to discovery. I'm not either responsible or directly involved in the execution of clinical trials, but I have 20 years of experience and more in the pharmaceutical industry, so I think I can give you a good picture of what the pharmaceutical industry in the developing medicines is involved in. So what I want to achieve by the end of this 30 minutes talk, and then we will have 30 minutes for discussions with my colleagues from 2 other medicines companies, is to really walk you through what the pharmaceutical industry is involved in, and really I hope you will be convinced that the pharmaceutical industry is driven by and drives medical progress. It aims to turn fundamental research into innovative treatments that are widely available and accessible to patients. I think all words in this statement are really important. Okay, so one example, quite recent example, that really highlights how the industry has contributed to significant improvements in patients' well-being. There are a number of examples around this, but the most recent I found was that between 2000 and 2009, an improvement in population-weighted mean life expectancy at birth of 1.74 years was seen across 30 OECD countries. And innovative medicines are estimated to have contributed to 73% of these improvements once other factors are taken into account, so, such as income, education, and reduction in risk factors and health system access. So by the end of this talk, I hope you will agree that the pharmaceutical industry is indeed a partner in the development of innovative treatments for patients. So this is a very broad overview, and why am I sharing this with you is that the pharmaceutical industry is actually involved in all of these stages, and most of the healthcare professionals really only see once the product is on the market and the post-marketing studies are executed. But actually, I have had the privilege to interact with a very experienced colleagues that are working in basic research, in drug discovery, in the preclinical phases, and then once the first in human, the phase 1 studies, the phase 2, phase 3, the market authorization application. There are a number of professionals involved in this that have very different experiences and backgrounds, some of them coming from the academy, and it is really a very exciting journey. An important number that usually fits to the very beginning here at the basic research, when you start screening for compounds that could potentially become a medicine, you start with around tens and thousands of compounds that are screened. And then when you get into, out of these tens and thousands, you get one medicine that will actually come to the market. Another number that is quite interesting to see is once you get into phase 1, so the first in human, out of all compounds that are tested in phase 1, you actually have 12% of them will potentially hit the market. So this is obviously a very risky journey and a very complicated journey. So what does it start with? It starts with the discovery process. Okay, so you have to understand the disease or the condition, and we're working, so the pharmaceutical industry is here working very closely with the universities, and obviously this is a joint development. Sometimes it's done independently by the industry, sometimes with the universities. And anyway, then the next stage will be to identify and validate a target. So that's the sort of the receptor that you will want to target in order to impact on the disease or the condition. And then there is the drug discovery. Okay, so you need to screen for molecules that potentially can have an impact on that target and that could become a new medicine. And the idea is to identify a lead compound. The lead compound is the one that will really make it into a preclinical then. And then there are some early safety tests that are done on tissues or on cells or on animal models to really understand that very initially if this compound is deemed to be safe enough to move over to animal and then human studies. There is also a step of lead optimization, so the lead compound, the one that you believe, or the ones that you believe potentially could make it into human studies. Sometimes in changing the compound, you may improve the pharmacokinetics or pharmacodynamics. So this is also something that our research groups are involved in. And then it goes to the preclinical testing in the lab and animal testing to determine if the drug really is safe enough to go over to human testing. That's obviously a very important milestone, because then there is a number of experts, internal experts, that are involved in making this decision whether the compound should or should not move over to the first in human. That's a very important decision to be taken. At this step, at the end of the discovery process, usually there is a patent application. Patent applications can be on at several stages of the development, but usually at the end of the discovery there is some sort of patent application. So what is a patent anyway? So I mean, I just looked at Wikipedia. Where does this all come from? So apparently Italy has played a significant role, because in the south of Italy, what then was ancient Greece, in Sybaris, apparently they liked very much good food, and really excellent food. So in Sybaris, the exclusive rights were granted for 1 year to the creator of a unique culinary dish. So the intention is really to get a lot of innovation here, so that people really invest their energy to create new fantastic dishes. And it was then the one who had innovated and created this new dish who was the only one allowed to produce the dish. And then a little bit closer, in the 15th century Venice, again Italy, it was a means to protect the nation's state glass-blowing industry. So the patent, and what we now really, we use more the terminology of intellectual property, is intended to stimulate innovation. So there is a portfolio of patents that relate to each medicine, so it can be about the molecule, the uses, the forms, or the manufacturing process, so many different types of patents. They are granted after expert scrutiny from the European Patent Office. And the review takes about 44 months on average, and half of the patents that are submitted are actually granted approximately. And in most cases, for a medicine, the drug patent is awarded for around 20 years from the moment where the patent is submitted and granted. But the effective patent period will obviously depend on the time it takes to develop the medicine. So the effective patent protection will be around 7 to 12 years at best. Okay, so now I went back, sorry. Okay, here. So now you have submitted the patent. You see to the left, patent has been submitted, so you have done all the discovery. What happens then? So then you are in the preclinical development, you're looking at toxicity, pharmacology, chronic toxicity, and then you move into the clinical trials with phase 1. Phase 2, phase 3, as we said, then you register or submit for market authorization. Then there are negotiations around the price and the reimbursement. And then there is the very important follow-up of the pharmacovigilance after the medicine is on the market, and I can only say how important this is for the pharmaceutical industry to have a pharmacovigilance that is extremely in close interaction with the authorities to make sure that we have at every stage of the life cycle of the medicine a true understanding of the benefit risk of the medicine. So for all of you who are interested, these slides, you can find them. They are on the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries Association's website, FPA, and it was just updated a week ago. So you will have very up-to-date presentations that are quite helpful. Okay, so at the bottom of the slide, you can see the R&D process. So it takes approximately 10 years before you get to the 10 to 13 years actually before you register the medicine, and then there is a lot of administrative procedures, and that takes also 2 to 3 years. So all in all, it's 13 years before the medicine comes to the market and can be used by patients. So I don't think this is really necessary. I don't know, please let me know. I just wanted to say that in all of these phases, typical phases of drug development, phase 1 clinical trial, we are closely involved. We have specific sites or working with specific sites to conduct these trials. So phase 1 is really the first in human, and to get an overall idea, this is around tens of for healthy volunteers. We're not in patients here. So 10 to 100 maximum healthy volunteers. So what is the main goal? It's really to find the lowest dose at which the treatment is likely to be effective, and the highest dose at which it can be taken without causing harm. Also in phase 1, there is some, we look at pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. Then it goes to phase 2. So here the candidate's drug potential effectiveness is evaluated while gathering further safety data. And this time it is patients that are volunteer with a disease or condition under study. And here we talk in hundreds of patients. And here this really helps determine the most effective dosage, the best method of delivery. Is it a tablet or an injection? And it begins to evaluate the benefit risk of the medicine. Okay, so next stage is obviously the phase 3, and here I think you have the whole workshop is really focusing very much on the phase 3. So here we count patients in thousands usually, and the compound is compared either to placebo or active comparator. And usually the comparator is the best standard treatment. And here, obviously, when you look at the global development program, it's always a little bit of a challenge because the standard treatment may not be the same in one country, in one region as in the other. And obviously the active comparator is used to determine if the new medicine has additional benefit beyond the current treatment. And the phase 3 trials is really what provides the basis for the labeling instruction to help ensure a proper use of the drug. Now registration, this is a very busy slide. I'm not going to go into the details. I just wanted to say that once you have the results from your phase 3 and the phase 2 and the phase 1 and the preclinical, you're going to include all this in a dossier that's going to be submitted to the authorities. So in the United States, a new drug application is filed with the US Food and Drug Administration. In Europe, a market authorization application is filed with the European Medicines Agency. Well, you've heard about that, but then there are obviously other agencies across the world. You have Health Canada, TGA in Australia, the PMDA in Japan, and many other agencies that will review the dossiers. If the approval is granted, the new therapy can then be sold for use as detailed in the final approval label granted by the regulatory authority. And then I'm not going to go into the post-marketing commitments, but this because that was just explained in the previous talk. Then after the market authorization, we have the phase 4 clinical trials, also called post-marketing studies. Again, you have heard about these, so it's really a critical tool to inform the ongoing use of the therapy and collect additional information about longer-term risk, benefit, and optimal use. And here again, it is thousands of participants for many years across the world. Pharmacovigilance. I'm really happy that we were perfectly aligned. This is a critical piece of our responsibility with a number of professionals and highly trained experts in pharmacovigilance within our companies. So obviously, once the medicine has been granted the market authorization, it's subject to strict monitoring designed to detect any potential safety or quality issues in the longer term that couldn't have been detected even in the now extensive phase 3 trials. And the company that has been granted the market authorization collects on a continuous basis data that relate to safety, quality and efficacy of the medicine, and all these data are then accessible to the regulatory agencies. And every single person working in a pharmaceutical company has a personal responsibility to report within 24 hours any adverse event or that they hear about. So it's really it's part of our everyday life. Okay, so now all of this obviously doesn't go without costs, and as was pointed out just before me, there are more requirements now than there were before in terms of registration. So the type of registrations with 370 patients is certainly not something that you would see anymore now. In cardiovascular, maybe in orphan, but not in cardiovascular. So as a consequence, the cost of developing a medicine increases exponentially. And this was actually too big. You can find it on the FPS site as well to squeeze it into the slide so it's readable. But if you look at the very bottom, this is the actual cost of developing a drug that is currently around $2.5 billion. And the previous bar is actually between 1990 and mid-2000. So it's really an exponential increase in cost. So what are the consequences? This means that obviously this is not a family business. This really has to be a big pharma that can do that with investors, and also very often shared responsibilities between the different companies, because one company rarely can bear the risk alone, because as you heard previously, there is a number of unsuccessful developments, and all companies have experienced that, and we definitely have it recently as well. So where does all this, is the proportion of, where does the investment reside? So most of the investment is really in the phase 3, because obviously you have many more patients, longer follow-up, and a number of data to collect. So the main investments is in phase 3, and then, okay, but does it help to invest in all these trials? Well, obviously it does, because as I said at the very beginning, it has an impact on patient well-being and patient life expectancy. So, and I think that we all can agree that this is our common goal. While we have separate interests, we have a common goal, which is to save and improve the well-being of patients. Now, this is something that you can find on the website of the European Medicines Agency. And I found that very important to highlight, that the European Medicines Agency relies on the results of clinical trials carried out by pharmaceutical companies to reach its opinion on the authorization of medicines. Sometimes we hear some, let's say, reservations about trials conducted by the pharmaceutical industry, but I think that, as pointed out by the European Medicines Agency, they definitely can be trusted for their quality, and also for the fact that they are conducted by professionals that definitively comply with the European Union clinical trials regulations, and when the trials are conducted outside of the European economic area, they still have to comply, obviously, with ethical principles equivalent to those set in the European economic area. So all the trials conducted across the world by the pharmaceutical industries have the same level of scrutiny and adhering to the international good clinical practices. Now, what's the number of trials that are ongoing? So in the European Economic Area, there are approximately 4,000 clinical trials authorized by year, each year. And approximately 61% of these clinical trials are sponsored by the pharmaceutical industry. That doesn't mean that it's the only ones that are supported, because the pharmaceutical industry does all the company-sponsored trials that you saw, that we talked about earlier. But on top of that, there is really this relationship with investigators that may have some specific requests or look at topics of their interest, and where the pharmaceutical company will support them, and this is what we call investigator-initiated research or investigator-sponsored trials, depending on the companies. An important piece as well in terms of commitment is the clinical trial data sharing. And here there are some, guidance from the European Medicines Agency and also from the FDA. In Europe, all the trials conducted in Europe need to be registered with the EuroCVP database. So this is the protocol, this is the trials, the ongoing trials. But then since 2014, there is also a summary of the results from the phase 2 to phase 4 that need to be submitted within 12 months of their end, or irrespective of the results, obviously, and within 6 months if it is for pediatric trials. And then there is a new regulation that is right now being implemented that requires the submission of a summary of the results and the clinical study reports to be public. And they will be publicly accessible on a new website that will be operational by the end of 2018. So this is really something that is evolving, but beyond the really the requirements of the medicines agencies, the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries Association and its member companies also has published and implemented principles for responsible sharing of clinical trial data that go beyond the legislative requirements. And the principles, what do they say? First of all, you need to safeguard the privacy of patients. Second, you need to respect the integrity of the national regulatory systems. And third, you need to maintain the incentives for investment in biomedical research. So what are the commitments then? First, there is the enhancing of data sharing with the researchers. So what does this mean? This means that someone who has a valid research, an academic person, a doctor, anyone, professional who has a valid research question can submit that question to a company who has conducted a trial, because they want to use the data from that trial to explore the question they have. So how does this work then? Then they will submit a protocol to the company, who will then evaluate whether it is a valid question, whether there are no issues potentially of re-identifying the patients, because then they can request patient-level data. But obviously we need to protect the privacy of patients, so that's why the protocol will be reviewed to see that there is no risk for re-identifying the patient, and also that obviously we would not support a protocol that would come from a competing company, because that would obviously not be a good incentive for investment in biomedical research. Then there is enhancing the public access to clinical study information, sharing the results with patients who participate in clinical trials, certifying procedures for sharing clinical trial information. So we have procedures in place to say, well, how are we going to deal with the requests, for instance, from a patient or from a research unit, and then reaffirming our commitments to publish clinical trial results. Okay, so this was really a quick overview of what the pharmaceutical industry is involved with, and I hope that with this presentation I gave a better overview of where we are involved in, and also I hope you agree with the fact that the pharmaceutical industry is definitely driven by and drives medical progress, and that it aims to turn fundamental research into innovative treatments that are widely available and accessible to patients. So thank you very much for your attention, and I think I'm very glad that we have the opportunity to have a panel of discussion with my colleague Dr. Paterno and Dr. Di Lecce from, please, I don't know, yeah.